Summer's here and the time is right for jumping into the water. First time I learned to swim, I think it was third grade, 1959, 1960, 61, somewhere in there. And it was at Fisherman's Beach in Massachusetts, Swampscott, Massachusetts. I think one of the fellas, or I think all the fellas from Boston, the band Boston, came from actually Swampscott. I learned to swim about 3 feet off of the shore, right at Fisherman's Beach. We swam until we were so cold our lips were blue and we never noticed, and it was a big deal to walk up the beach and across the street to the Rexall store and get a cup of hot chowder out of the scoop at the Rexall store. It had a counter. You know, like in civil rights, you always see there's a counter. Now we just have the civil rights. There's no more counter. But now you have Postmates. Previous to that was Indiana. Newcastle, Indiana is the great outdoors. It's corn stalks and railroad tracks. My Uncle Manny, my Uncle Dad, my Uncle Dave, Dad, they all celebrated kind of at or about the same high school reunion 55 summers later. And they had pictures from when they were little kids, like out of Stand By Me, striped T-shirts, wearing dog tags because it was World War II, at or about, which turned into Korea, at or about. They took pictures dancing down the railroad tracks next to the cornfield, and then 55 summers later when they were all grown up, same exact railroad tracks. We had a lake right next door. That's the first time I carried the shotgun, is to hunt the muskrats, which is why Mom wouldn't let me learn to swim in the lake, not after the first lesson. Pop was in school on the GI Bill, and we moved to Brookline, Massachusetts so that he could go to Mass General as a resident and train in the retinal detachment program. This was brand new. Pop loved sports, and what's the first thing to go in sports besides your lower back? My fucking eye hurts. You gotta go see Roth. He gets the tough stains out. Wait a minute, that's my station ID. I'm stronger than dirt. Don't play the ID. We don't need no stinking ID.
Roth Show.
As any resident in any of the medical arts can share with you, the word resident is Latin for broke. Pop rode a bicycle to the hospital. We were going to actually drive a car from Brookline, Massachusetts when he graduated. He was going to start his practice, drive to Pasadena with his family in a car. We were going to come cross country, but on his bicycle, somebody popped their door open on his way to his last classes, and he broke his arm. Couldn't handle the luggage. It was literally, jig clamp it with the stuff piled up on top of the car and, moving west, y'all, setting up shop. Third grade delivered me 3 big passports. The first was my bicycle, which is just about anybody's passport. That's your first passport. It's like yesterday. I remember my pop running, and then he pulled his hands away, and those first 15 yards were terrifying. And then I kind of figured it out, and I remember him yelling, "Remember how fast it goes." Sounds like a great country song, doesn't it? Remember how fast it goes. Starts with the pop pushing the kid, 3-speed Schwinn, screaming, remember how fast it goes. Next it goes to kids growing up asking for the keys to the car. Remember how fast it goes. Then Pop is ailing. He's a gray beard. You bring in the violin or a viola. I think a viola, Tom. Write this down. You know now that Pop's about to step to the heavenly gate, but not quite yet. And he holds the hands of the son who's now got his young wife and the little kid. And he tells him, remember how fast this goes. It then finishes with the kid all grown up pushing his kid. It's a little sappy, right? Second was learning how to swim in the YMCA swimming hole. That's what Pop always called it. It was indoors in one of those big, ringy, noisy linoleum square, those little linoleum tiles that bounced sound everywhere and made anything sound ominous and terrifying. Swimmers, report art. And it smelled of chlorine, so much chlorine that it changed your fucking suntan. We also didn't care about that. After one dunk, you would smell of chlorine for 3 days. We all knew as kids that it would turn your hair green, which was fucking cool, because then everybody else at school would know you could swim. Sidebar, on the way to the YMCA, you would pass the football field, and I mean gridiron football. proper football or soccer had not actually taken hold, was way far away from taking hold. And the best part of the football field was during the winter when the fire department would show up and flood the place so it would freeze into a great big giant hockey rink, which is why most of my bottom teeth are missing right now. So fuck you, Tom.
Roth Show.
Just the fire department turning out was a big event. Everybody went to watch them hose it down and hose it down, wait a little bit, and hose it down and hose it down. Back then, police and fire, they all smoked cigarettes. They all stopped in at the local Rexall, or you could see them having a drink or a coffee. They accepted the ride. Everybody. You always knew that if you owned a Rexall, cops got free coffee. So did the fire folks. And free cigarettes. Pasadena, California, 1963. You had two kinds of water, sink water and hose. Hose water during the summer. That's what you drank, right out of the hose. And the best trick was to hold it for your sister and block your hand on the spigot. I mean, right up until 3 days ago, which is why she's not speaking to me. Hose water meant the slip and slide. What could be more fun than laying out a piece of slippery plastic and you would inflate it and it's got water that runs so it's ultra slippery. And you could put this on any surface, which we did. The driveway, what could possibly go wrong? And you set it on the incline. Once you got used to it, you realized the incline could increase your velocity. And if you increased the water past where they recommended, you could get up to what I realize now on my e-bike, because it has an odometer, right around 20 miles an hour, head first, at about, I don't know, I think it was 10 years old, okay? And you take a running start and throw yourself onto your belly and head for whatever you perceive might stop your accelerated thing. It's a lot like Roadrunner. Remember Acme, the Acme Corporation? The Acme giant slingshot that shot the coyote past the target. The Acme Corporation that made the rocket sled, the single most failing company in the history of mankind. But we still wanted to see them every weekend. Some of what we do here is the same. Some of my personality is brought to you by the Acme Corporation. I know. Listening to this, you've always felt like you've been strapped into the front of a high-velocity rocket sled. Pop was just starting his practice. We had yet to have a second story on the house or a second car parked out front. That meant summer camp was all religious-oriented, which in Pasadena, California meant the YMCA. And the YMCA is where I first really learned how to do all the different strokes and swim in the water, etc. And Mom would take us to the public swimming pools. There's a great one. I don't know if it's still out there. It must be out by Griffith Park. It had fountains. It had deep end. It had high dive. It had middle dive. And that was part of our daycare for a number of summers there. There was a swimming pool in back of the Jewish temple, but we used to call that parking space. You would simply find a vacant slot, slide in, and introduce yourself to the four people you were butt up against. Consequently, a tight-knit community. Well-bathed. California beach culture, 1965, if you couldn't make it to the beach, you had a skateboard and you made your own. Going to the beach with the family was a big to-do because it was a micro expedition, I would call it today. And that blossomed into when you were in junior high, you had somebody who had an older brother and you got to tag along and you discovered places like Huntington Beach where the Wedge was and places that had names that were right out of Beach Boy classics. San Onofre and Sunset, Ventura County Line. Saltwater reached into all kinds of musical libraries and personalities. It was in Van Halen, the idea of outdoor and colorful, getting physical, but let's not get athletic until after hours. Fleetwood Mac is California, and California is saltwater, and Jimmy Buffett, I already miss you. Saltwater. I recollect, not from personal experience, but I do recollect from observation purely, that I would spend between 4 and 6 hours in the public pool out by Griffith Park. It was daycare for Mom, and all the moms would sit off on the side and read paperbacks under the umbrellas. I wondered if some traditions had changed at one point, because when I was doing the OR work, when I was teching early 70s, I was working in the operating room, one of the nurses had to pick up her kid from that swimming pool. kid had been in swimming lessons and summer camp or day camp, whatever was being offered over there. And I noticed that there had to be 300 kids in and around the pool, most of them in the water. And they, of course, like I had, been in the water for 4 to 6 hours. I also noticed that in the men's room, there were virtually no kids' footprints at all. My point? I have some versification in swimming pools. And the world is not a ghetto. It's not a community. It's not a collection of teepees with one world, one love. That's a really great weekend in Black Rock City with Cindy Crawford and Chris Rock. And it's starting to rain. But who fucking cares? Because I'm in a teepee eating peyote with Chris Rock and Cindy Crawford. Allegedly. The world is a swimming pool. And if you pee in one end of it, sooner or later, like the commercial for General Tires used to go, sooner or later, you're gonna own General. Forgiveness fall down like rain on a sun-scorched land. Forgiveness rushed in like air to a drowning man. Forgiveness like home from a journey of 1,000 miles. Forgiveness like milk and honey.
Roth Show.